Welcome, and today I am joined once again by Barry, all the way from Missouri, USA, originally of Derbyshire, England, right?
That's right.
And today we are reviewing Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan. So there is the real potential here, if I didn't know what your channel was called, for us to have a bit of a falling out, because The Wrath of Khan is kind of precious to me. It is probably the first thing that I watched that was Star Trek that I really loved, because the TV show was on when I was growing up, and then the Next Generation came out and I liked it, but it wasn't until I saw The Wrath of Khan, which probably was around 1990, something like that, so it probably was before the Next Gen came out, that I suddenly was like, wow, this sort of crummy 60s TV show that I was too young to appreciate is actually quite special. So what was your first experience of The Wrath of Khan?
It was actually in the cinema. Star Trek 4 had just come out at the cinema, and my mum was walking across the marketplace in Derby, and there was a poster in the assembly room's window, and it said, "This week only." I think it was about Easter time, but I was very young, I was only about 5. And it said, "This week only, all the Star Trek films are showing." And so Mum called Dad and said, "I'm going to go and take him to see these films." And he said, wait, which cinema are you going to? I'll come down and I'll watch it with you. And we walked into the cinema, and 2 minutes later Dad arrived. And the guy said, if I remember something about Star Trek 3 is about to start, but the end of Star Trek 2 is still on. So we sat down. The first thing I ever saw of Star Trek was the Enterprise coming up behind the Reliance and then started shooting at it in the nebula. That was the very first thing I ever saw. And then when the warp engine blows off, I can remember thinking, well, this is cool. I didn't understand what was going on, because I was only about 5. And then, of course, I didn't understand that Spock was what happens. I don't want to spoil it for people, although I'm assuming that people who are tuning in to watch this already know the ending.
We're going to spoil it in the course of this video, I'm sure.
We then sat through all the way through Star Trek 3 and all the way through Star Trek 4. So that was my very first experience of Star Trek. It was being shown on a Wednesday night about 6 o'clock, and it was for years and years and years. And Next Generation was on first, and then I saw the original. And then Star Trek 2 was on TV one night. I think it was during a summer holiday on TV, I think. That's the first time that I actually watched it all the way through. And I was thinking, this is great. I was 10, 11 years old, something like that. But a few years ago, I did get to see the chance to see it on the big screen all the way through, because William Shatner was presenting it.
Right.
So my wife treated me to go and see it, because she knew that I loved the film, and she knew that I wanted to meet William Shatner. 2016, I think it was. So I have actually seen it all the way through on the big screen twice. Once the last 20 minutes, and then once with Shatner there.
And you met Shatner, or he was just there?
Yeah, I actually met him. You had to have a special ticket to go and actually meet him. He didn't sign any autographs or anything, but it was literally just meet him and saying hello and thank you and all that sort of thing. And he actually said, "Thank you for coming to watch it, because it's the fans that make it what it is." And he's got this reputation of being a real difficult person. It wasn't difficult with me at all. I thought he was fine. He was great.
The part of that reputation, I think, comes from Sulu, doesn't it? And that he regularly and famously speaks out about issues. But it's quite interesting when you watch Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan, is that the credits at the start come up and it's like starring Shatner, Nimoy, DeForest Kelley, and then it's like also starring, and it's like, Shatner was the star of the show. Sulu, in the first series particularly, was like a guy that was in a couple of episodes. Like, why would Shatner be like, oh, let's be the bestest pals? So I'm kind of like, I kind of want to sit on the fence, because I like them both. But I can kind of see, it's like, the star of the show doesn't have to go out of his way to be friendly or chatty or any of those things with a guy that, for all he knows, is only going to ever be a bit player in the show. I don't know what his relationship was like with the woman that played Nurse Rand in the first couple of seasons, but she was in it more than Sulu.
So was Uhura.
Yeah.
Michelle Nichols got on with Shatner just fine, although she did say to him, I think you're hogging the limelight a bit because you're the star of the show. And he said, well, why didn't you tell me this earlier? Because then I would have done something differently. But it's only really George Takei who has a problem.
Yeah.
And there's a video on YouTube where Shatner says, I just didn't talk to him. He was only there for like 1 or 2 days a week. I was busy learning my lines.
Yeah.
You know, so I didn't have time to say, hello, how are you? Let's get to know each other, because I was busy.
I don't doubt that Shatner's ego was slightly bruised by the fact that he's the star of the show, but Spock is just more memorable, being the alien, the other things outside of it. So I think that would probably bruise your ego a little bit.
I mean, if you see him in interviews or at conventions, people will say, oh, it's Captain Kirk. He said, yeah, I'm Captain Kirk, and he'll sign you an autograph and that sort of thing. He's not bothered about it. Whereas if you say to Patrick Stewart, you're Captain Picard, no, I'm Patrick Stewart first and Captain Picard second. He's a little bit more serious about it, which is fine. I understand that, because, of course, you know, he'd done an awful lot of stage work before then.
Patrick Stewart is a lovey, though, isn't he? His background is theatre, or at least earlier in his career it was, and that actually you can kind of see that when he's on the set of a film, that sometimes he's a little bit theatre still. But that isn't really something for the Wrath of Khan review. I assume that you've watched it back fairly recently in preparation for this video. Yeah, I watched it yesterday. It's the first time that I've seen it in a little while, and I did do a little bit of homework to see what people said about the film, particularly when it came out. But the main criticism I could find from contemporary critics of the 80s was poor special effects and poor acting, which is interesting, having just discussed Patrick Stewart, to get onto the subject of the acting. But I've got to say that the only person in the film whose acting you could go, not quite brilliant, is the guy that plays the commander of the Reliant. But I still think that he's good. I think that people like Shatner, Spock, Shatner, Nimoy, and DeForest Kelley particularly are magnificent, as they always are. And I just don't see where that criticism comes from, really. What are your thoughts?
I just don't get that at all, because what the director did to get a really good performance from Shatner was he made it do it over and over and over again. There's a scene, we'll get to it in a bit. There's a scene where Kirk turns to Khan and he says, here it comes. And the first 4 or 5 times they did it, Shatner said, here it comes. And the guy said, no, don't do that, because Khan's really smart. He's going to realise you've got something up your sleeve. Let's try it again. And he realised the best way to get Shatner to act naturally was to make him bored and make him do it over and over again. Conversely, with Ricardo Montalban, he was perfect first or second take. So you didn't have to work with him as much.
It's interesting because Nicholas Meyer's background is TV. It's not film at all. He was brought on board because of the budget of the first film being ridiculously high for what it was. This film's, you'll probably know because you have a memory for this sort of thing, but like the first one's like $40 million budget, and this one's like 12. So it's like almost a quarter. Certainly, you know, you can decide between a third or a quarter, but it's a small fraction of the original budget, and they obviously they reused stuff from other shows, sets and things. So you know where they're cutting corners. But it's interesting that he'll be spending so much time on a take, because time on your set is money too, and he's looking at coming under budget. But the performances that he gets, they're outstanding. I mean, particularly Ricardo Montalban, who's just... He set the tone for Trek villains going forward. It's like if you're not quoting Moby Dick or Shakespeare, you're not really a proper Trek villain. Even Undiscovered Country is a line from Hamlet. So it's like, come on.
From a Hamlet up and yelling, "I have a gun." I saw that in the cinema as well.
The sixth one.
Yeah, I've seen all the Star Trek films at the cinema. I saw the motion picture. It was just after its 40th anniversary re-release. And they showed it in 4K at the local cinema. It was fantastic. That's a film that gets better every time you watch it.
We're not here to review that one. However, I will say that I probably agree with that. I've seen it 3 times. The first time, I could barely sit through it. But the second time, I was like, yeah, there's something about this. And the third time, which was fairly recently, I watched it. I was actually, this is just good Trek. So it's interesting, slightly off the topic of Wrath of Khan, but it's interesting that you've got good Trek on TV. Didn't like it. The film, the motion picture would have been an episode very similar in standards to an episode of the original series, but it wasn't well received by audiences or by critics at the time. So what is it about original series Trek that works so well on the TV but not quite as well on the film that they've had to sort of up the ante with this second film?
Yeah. Well, actually, there's an episode of the original series called The Changeling, which is exactly the same plot as the first film.
Right.
There's a probe called Nomad. It's traveling through space. It thinks Kirk's its creator and it's wiping out everything in its path. It's exactly the same plot. And Gene Roddenberry took that because it was his favourite episode, and he just magnified the plot and magnified, what was going on. It was basically the same story. I appreciated that. I thought it was okay. I think it could have done with about half an hour taken out, but with Wrath of Khan, they sat down and they actually watched all of the episodes to understand what the series was actually about. This was Carl Bennett and Nicholas Meyer. And Nicholas Meyer said, "Oh, right, I get it. Okay, so it's got to be fast moving. It's got to be about the characters first and the plot and the special effects second." I think that's where they kind of, not exactly went wrong, but they were too caught up in what they were doing in the first film, and then they put it right with the second one and so on. Search for Spock is actually in a very similar vein to Wrath of Khan in the way it's set up, and I think that's very underrated as well. Obviously it's never going to match up to Wrath of Khan, but it had the similar vibe. It carried on the story very well. I really enjoyed that one as well.
For me, The Search for Spock is the Alien 3 of the series. And what I mean by that is you've got all this stuff that's been set up in the second film, Wrath of Khan or Aliens, and then at the very start of the film, the sequel, they go, "I'm chucking all that out and doing something else." And that annoys people a little bit, particularly with the Aliens more so than the Trek. But for me, they're both, Alien 3 and Star Trek 3, decent films if you can get over the fact that they kind of ignore or dispense with some of the stuff from the previous one that you're invested in. For example, writing off Hicks and Newt in Alien, but in this one he kills David right at the start. But the second film seems to me to be setting up an older Kirk, a wiser Kirk, a slightly different Kirk going forward, and that his son being there is part of that, if not the entire motivation for that. So when they kill him in the first scene, it's a very emotional and decent scene. And Kirk, I think, Shatner called it like the best moment for Kirk on screen or something like that. And it is a good scene, but I wanted to see more of David going forward. What are your thoughts on that? And then I'll come back to a second follow-up question.
Well, I like the actor anyway. His name's Merritt.
It's a name that in the UK, if you went to school with a name like Merritt Buttrick, you're in trouble. You're going to get a lot of grief in the school called that. But he does quite well in the role. I got no issues with it.
He did all right. I think he started in the second film. He was a little bit stagey, but he got better as it went on. But then in the third film, he was really good in that. And to just kill him off like that so suddenly, I thought, you kind of shooting yourself in the foot. I would have actually killed Savikov, because I think that would have been a much more emotional punch, because she was in Wrath of Khan a lot more. I think that would have been a little bit more interesting. Overall, I can't fault the performances of Merritt or Shatner. I mean, there's only one scene in the whole of Wrath of Khan where he goes back to his old, "We are going to do this now," and everything else is really underplayed, which was especially at the end, and he's just sat there absolutely devastated. He's not crying, he's not screaming like it would be in a J.J. Abrams film. And I suppose we've got to talk about that very, very briefly. Star Trek Into Darkness, they tried everything to remake Wrath of Khan with that film. It was an abject failure. That is the worst film I had ever paid money to see in the cinema. And I walked out of it and I was absolutely fuming. And a friend who came with me said, "Why are you so angry?" I said, "Because that was the biggest piece of I've ever seen. That was absolute garbage." And the whole thing with Spock screaming Khan at the end and Kirk dying and coming back to life after 5 minutes later. The worst part of it was Benedict Cumberbatch trying to play Khan and saying, I am Khan. No, you're not. Khan was a big strapping bloke who looked like he could tear your face off. He wasn't this weedy, pale little bloke. No, you're not Khan. I was just so angry after that.
Other than on technical aspects, there is nothing good about that film. Nothing at all.
No.
Going back to Wrath of Khan and leading into the third film, particularly what you're saying about how that you would kill off Saavik is interesting, because for me, once it was obvious that Kirstie Alley wasn't coming back, I would have written that character out and I wouldn't have included it anyway. But you also have this issue with David sort of admitting that he's cheated on the Genesis, that it's not quite what it seems and it's not stable. And that's like a really interesting thing, again, that we don't get to see played out. But my opinion of the two characters is that when you watch The Wrath of Khan, it's quite natural that Chekhov should die. Chekhov should have died when the Reliant commander, whose name is I'm blanking on, died. They should have died at the same time.
Harold was his name.
Yeah. And also Spock.
Yeah.
In that, I know as an audience favourite, and just like the way this transcended science fiction and culture, like they were never going to be able to get away with killing Spock. But it seemed to me like they were setting up David and Saavik to replace those two. That it was just a natural part of the story for Chekhov to die, for Spock at the end to be dead, rather than to come back, even though there were changes made. I don't know what the changes specifically made were, but they did anger Nicholas Meyer, was one of the reasons why he didn't come back and do 3. Yeah. If you're not going to replace them, you do have too many cooks. Get rid of some of the characters. So if you're not going to replace Spock and Chekhov, then fine, kill the new guys off. But Saavik I just wouldn't have brought back. If what character arc is there for that character if you're not going to make them a part of the crew? If you're not going to change Kirk in any way, then admittedly you don't need David. But it seemed like that was such a key part of the second film, that we've got an older, wiser Kirk, or a Kirk coming to grips with changes in his life. But that ultimately didn't play out at all, beyond constantly revisiting it. It seemed like every Trek film or book or any Trek media after that is like, Kirk's coming to terms with being older. It's like, well, no, he's not, because you had that opportunity, you didn't take it, and now you've just got Kirk doing all the same stuff. It's just he's an older guy and he says stuff about being too old and stuff occasionally now. It was a wasted opportunity.
Yeah.
That said,
it's like the bit in Star Trek 5 when he's climbing up mountains. It's like, well, hold on a minute. 2 films ago, you were saying how old and creaky you feel. Now you're climbing mountains. I mean, Shatner looks like he'd have a bit of trouble doing a couple of laps around the track, to be honest.
It's a shame that they didn't play it out a little bit more. They didn't have a bit more courage with the third film, because I think that they had an opportunity there. Going back to what you're saying about the second JJ Trek film, one of the things that I really despised about that movie, I was in the cinema genuinely angry about the lack of respect that it showed the audience, was the Kobayashi Maru test, when he's like sitting there eating an apple. Like it's so obvious to literally anybody that you've cheated. They would just be stopping that, going, what the fuck's going on? You're not taking this test seriously. And anyone watching it with a brain would be like, that is just fucking garbage writing, really garbage writing. But when I watched this one back, I don't think the Kobayashi Maru is a good test of anything. And I'll tell you what I mean by that, is that there is no choice. You don't present, like Saavik is the one taking the test in this, but they don't present her with a, if you do this, these are the consequences, and if you do this, these are the consequences, because that is a test of character. Which one do you choose? Like there's a train coming down, and you can throw the track one way and it will hit a child, or throw it the other way and it will hit like 2 adults. Which one would you choose? That sort of test of character. But this isn't a test of anything. It's just you're put in a situation you can't get out of. When I watched this one back, I thought, actually, that's one of the weaker aspects of this, is that all it's done is make her question herself going forward. is actually set her back, not tested anything. What are your thoughts?
It puts doubt into the mind of the commander who's in charge, thinking, well, should I do this or should I do that? Now, the way Kirk dealt with it and actually reprogrammed it so he could win is absolutely spot on. Kirk, that fits his character so well. And really, I think that is really the solution to the test. Can you think outside the box and come up with a way of making this work? Because if there is no solution and there is no end game to it, then there is no point in having the test. You're absolutely right. It's like having a chess game where both sides do not have a king. All you're doing is moving pieces around the board. It'd be like having a Formula One race without a checkered flag at the end. It's ridiculous.
It's a strange one, all right, but you are right in that Kirk cheating the test is completely in Kirk's character to find a way to win when there isn't really one there. But to show it, it was so obvious that J.J. Abrams would show it because he's not intelligent enough to know that a show needs backstory. If you don't have backstory, you are wasting your time. So he has to show it. It's like, remember that thing you've heard of? Here it is. He's not clever enough to just go, you could start Into Darkness with him being reprimanded for having cheated on it or something like that. So it remains backstory, but they just don't have the brain power Bad Robot to actually do that sort of writing.
There is a point I would like to make about Into Darkness's opening.
Go on.
When the Enterprise is on the ocean floor, well, first of all, it's a starship. Why isn't it in orbit? Why are you hiding it on the ocean floor? There is no reason to do this. It's not explained in the story at all. You didn't need to show the ship to the natives whatsoever. It should have been in orbit. And you could have got Spock out of that volcano without revealing yourself, because you could have just sent a shuttlecraft in there. In fact, I think they actually tried to do that. So the first 15 minutes of that film is a completely useless waste of time.
Yeah. It is an insult to everyone that watches it and has any working knowledge of Star Trek. It reminds me of the Futurama episode where this Planet Express ship goes underwater and they're saying, what pressure is it under? It's like, 3 atmospheres. How many can it take? Well, it's a spaceship, so between 0 and 1. So
it's a starship. It's not a submarine. It's that simple.
But it's like the Star Destroyers under the ground in Revenge of the Sith, isn't it? It's like, that would be cool to see them coming up. But what purpose does it serve?
Yeah. Like J.J. Abrams, it doesn't have to have a purpose as long as it looks nice.
No.
It's like James Bond in that invisible car and he drives it in the snow. Well, a car in snow is going to leave tyre tracks, so you're undermining the whole point about an invisible car. So there's no point doing this. So why are you even writing it?
With Into Darkness, I think that the opening thing that they get becomes slightly relevant at the end in a sort of throwaway way, and it's clearly because somebody said to the screenwriter, but that 15 minutes at the start is irrelevant, they have to use the MacGuffin that they got, or there's no point to this, so they end up using it, if I remember Into Darkness correctly. But what you don't have, as far as I can tell, in The Wrath of Khan is any moment of wasted time. And what I mean by that is you've got the book for the novelization there, so you know that there were bits in the original script that were turned into the novel and not in the film. And there's one bit that actually, in the novel, if you read the novel, there's quite a lot that you think it was better that was cut. But there's only one bit that's not quite as good in the film as in the novel, and that is the death of Peter Preston, the young lad that's in engineering. Because in the book, if I recall, he is Scotty's nephew or something like that. Right. And it becomes a much more emotional death of a crew member than is how it plays out in the film rather.
Have you seen the director's cut of Wrath of Khan?
No.
Get hold of it. It's a 2-disc one. You can probably get it cheap off Amazon. They put that back into the film.
Oh, did they?
Yeah. Along with a couple of other things. There's a scene where Kirk and Bones are talking after Peter dies, and Bones says something along the lines of, how did he know about Genesis? And Kirk says, I'm not sure, but I'm going to try and find out. We've got to do this now because I've messed up here. And you can kind of see the effect that these people in sickbay dying because of his mistake are having on him. And it really adds that kind of depth to it, but it also adds in the fact that Peter is Scotty's nephew. And it was one of the things that Nicholas Meyer thought And he said, but I need this in the film to give it context. And they refused it and they cut it out, which is kind of like the thing with the book that annoys me is that we do not have any backstory on Khan. It's all about the backstory of Savik and these scientists who are developing Genesis. We don't need to know this. What would be more interesting is having Khan's backstory and how he became the person he is.
I think that in part that is because it's Vonda and McIntyre who has sort of picked up on this new female character and wanted to put her front and center. It may have been that the original script also put her front and center, in which case it would have been a mistake, which was thankfully corrected in the movie. But there is a lot of Savik in the book, way too much Savik in the book.
Yeah.
Whereas the film, you get exactly as much as you need. I think that was, in terms of filmmakers, perfectly judged. Like a lot of the film actually is very slick. It's very, we do not waste a lot of time and we're moving around pretty quickly.
The thing that got me with it is how well paced it is. And again, if you watch it a few times, which I have, it's so well paced in every line, especially in the first half of the movie, has significant impact on what goes on later. When Bones comes to see Kirk and he says, you need to get back to Starship because you are bored, you are miserable behind this desk, you should not be here, you should be on the Enterprise. And Spock, when he says, you need to take command, said, no, but said, no, you're the senior officer, you're also a far better commander than I am, you're in this command seat.
Yeah, that is a great scene in terms of Spock sort of lets him have a little bit of a say, and then he's like, you're dragging this out, I'm going to stop you there, I've no ego to bruise, the ship is yours, and the scene is over. And for all the bombast and hectic pacing of the J.J. Abrams films, I think that scene would have been 5 minutes of people screaming at each other, and it would have been absolutely insufferable, because they never got Spock right, despite the wealth of experience they could have drawn on, and they had Leonard Nimoy on set. They never got Spock right. And in the 80s, I think with science fiction, you could get away with being a little bit more thoughtful, whereas now it's not a special effects movie, then the studio is going to be like, why isn't this a special effects movie? Whereas this film is actually quite clever, it's quite thoughtful, and it's clearly the way also there's intertextuality with things like Moby Dick and King Lear that, come on, is J.J. Abrams experienced either? Has he read Moby Dick? I don't think so. I think he's just...
Well, he's probably never heard of it.
Well, I don't want to get too much into him because I'd rather this video remained a positive one. But what's quite interesting about this film as well for a science fiction film is that the violence in it is really ugly, and death in it is really ugly. People are like burned and bleeding, and I think you consider this that Empire Strikes Back was either the same year or the year before. Actually, I think Empire was 80, so it would have been 2 years apart. But there's for a movie with that much war, there's virtually no real death in it. You don't see anyone die. Whereas like Kirk, after Peter Preston grabbed him, and he's got the blood on his shirt for about 2-3 scenes afterwards, and it's Scotty holding his corpse on the bridge, which I thought probably nobody's going to do that. But at the same time, it's quite a dramatic and grisly moment. It reinforces the stakes that are at play here, and that helps, I think, because Khan is a great villain, but you have to see that the violence that he's causing has significant consequences. Otherwise, the strength of the villain is undercut, and you get like the one in Star Trek Beyond, the latest one, which is, I don't dislike it as much as the two before, but it has no villain. It has it never feels like there's any real stakes. And again, that if we're talking about
the word of what that bloke was saying, it's just what is he saying? I don't get it. And then it turned out it was Idris Elba. Idris Elba is a brilliant actor. If you ever watch Luther, totally wasted. In Wrath of Khan, when they find the scientists hanging in the space station and there's the throats have been cut and everything like that, that's a real moment. I can remember the first time I saw it, I was like, I was not expecting that, and I was really, this is a bit full on for a Star Trek. I mean, in the original series, I mean, yeah, they had some nasty moments here and there, like the scene where Kirk's brainwashing that torture chair or whatever it was, which was a little bit grisly, or maybe Joan Collins getting run over in City on the Edge of Forever. But it was always at a distance. There was no actual physical closeness and unpleasantness. In Wrath of Khan, when people die or people get hurt, it has significant. You're right, it has significant impact, and especially at the end when Khan comes up from behind the console and his face is all fucked up.
Yeah.
And you know, in the book, his hand's been blown off and he can't walk or anything like that. And it really hits you very hard. It's like, whoa, this is some serious stuff going on here.
It is a very serious movie in that. For all, you know, when you typically have the Nimoy, Shatner, Kelly sort of triumvirate on screen, there's usually a lot of banter back and forth.
Yeah.
And there's not so much in this. They riff well off each other, really well, to the point that it's an absolute joy to watch the three of them. Like the bit where he's like, "Take care, Jim," and Bones like, "We will." It's like a great line, brilliantly delivered, but it is like one of the briefest moment of levity in a very dark film. As a kid, the thing that freaked me out, like really just made my skin crawl, was a horrible, horrible thing, was the eels going in the ears. I was just like,
when I first watched it on TV, that part was actually cut down. You still see the eel starting to try to crawl in the ears. I was like, no. But yeah, that is really creepy and horrible. And again, it was ruining that J.J. Abrams film. So I've got this slug, I'm going to put it down your throat if you actually tell me what I want. It's like, okay, so you're just recycling stuff that we've seen before done better.
Yeah.
But that scene with the eels was really, especially when it crawls out of his ear at the end and it's covered in blood. I was like, whoa, this is almost horror movie like. This is really grim.
Nasty.
Yeah, absolutely. It's the scream that he makes when it comes out. That's the thing that I was like, oh no. It was, you know, Chekhov's he's a nice character and we care about him. And also the actor playing him seems to be a lot more level-headed than George Takei. I'm not going to get into all that, but he's a little bit more approachable, I think.
He's been in Star Trek fan films. Chekhov, Walter Koenig, isn't it? I'm trying to get the name right. Yeah. So yeah, he seems like a very chilled guy, sort of at ease with his place in Star Trek. I think in The Wrath of Khan, it's hard to judge because I was too young when it came out and didn't see it for many years anyway. People loved Chekhov after the Whales film, after the fourth film, because of the whole nuclear vessels thing. It's like he was a comedy relief in it. And I think people really loved him in there, whereas before I think he was liked. That's why, going back to what I said earlier, I think they could have got away with killing him in 1982. But I think 1991, Undiscovered Country, you definitely couldn't have got away with killing him. By then he was too popular.
But yeah, it's a film with an awful lot of tension all the way through it. I mean, the scene where they find the cargo containers on SETI Alpha 5 and they go in and then they're looking around and then Chekhov realizes where they are, what's going on. He's like, we've got to leave now. Again, that's actually a bit of a plot hole. Why wouldn't you just beam back to the Reliant from inside the container?
Yeah.
Although I can kind of say, because you're in a bit of a panic, you're not going to think too much about it. So I can kind of buy that.
Do you want to know what I think happened there? Genuinely, I think that as a writer, I would have tried to put a line in like, we can't beam in because the storm is... But then I would have seen the scene play back and I would have probably cut that line out because that scene plays so quickly for what is a scene that just like a little bit of an undercurrent of tension, not really sure what's going on, but it just sets everything up quite nicely. The way that scene plays out is so perfect the way it is that if I thought, no, I need a line in there, we can't beam out because of the storm, it would have broken the way that it flowed. And I would have ended up just cutting it out and hoping that no one would go, that's a plot hole, even though you have kind of created one.
The big plot hole that I found was when the Reliant approaches the star system and said, we're going to check this planet out, wouldn't they have scanned the star system and realised that planet is missing?
I don't know. I don't know, and here's why I say I don't know. Is because if you're coming in to a star system, you when you see a map of like our solar system and the planets are lined up, and it's just they're not going to be like that. They're going to be scattered all around. Some will be on the other side of the sun, and some will be, in elliptical orbits and like all over the place. So you would have gone, where's the planet that's roughly where we're supposed to be, and gone there, I think. So I think you're kind of right in that you would expect when it's Ceti Alpha 6 or 5, and you're like, well, one of them's missing, that maybe you go, But I also think that, not wanting to run down any audiences, but if you'd said Ceti Alpha 1 had exploded, for example, and that had moved them all out of alignment, that would probably be more realistic, and that if Ceti Alpha 6 explodes and moves 5 out of orbit, it's going to move it out a long way potentially and just completely make it uninhabitable. Move it out of that zone of being temperate or whatever, and just destroy the atmosphere if it moves a long way. But if it moves just a little bit, it might keep its atmosphere. So I'm kind of like, I think that they probably were thinking, like, the planet next door, we have to say that because for people to understand what's happened. But like the shifting of gravity of one exploding in a more distant part of the solar system might have been more realistic. But you kind of got to go with what's going to work in the scene.
I'd agree with that. The other thing is when Khan appears, that is such a magnificent moment when all he's doing is taking his cloak off, taking his cape off, and all that sort of thing. And it is just so simple. But then when he looks at Chekhov, and it's like, that's a look that could freeze water. That is just so, why are you here? I want answers now. And he doesn't have to say anything. His entire body language does it for him. He's that threatening and that dominating of the scene because he's just such a massive presence. And I hate to drag this up yet again, but you compare that with Benedict Cumberbatch turning up and he's just standing there saying whatever line it was.
I am Khan Ninian Singh, or it was like, just piss off, get out of my face. It's just rubbish. Because Khan didn't need to do that. Not at any point did he have to stand and puff himself up. He was just like you say, he just give you the look. He has a real presence about him, not just as a human being, but as a top draw actor. He just has something about him when he's in a scene. It's just like you say, just taking his stuff off. But the way that that's shot, it is sinister because he's got that little. You see nothing apart from a little bar across his eyes, and what you're seeing is just his hand, and it's just like ever so slightly. But the hand itself is a symbol of power. So the fact that he's using it in just such a restrained way, it's like this. He's such a clever guy. I don't know if I've given Nicholas Meyer not enough credit because I'm assuming that it was performance, but also you have to be in the right position to catch that performance. And I do think that just his hand movements, like there's simple, restrained, completely in charge of every little thing going on. It's not like, there's a bit of dust, and it's just nothing is wasted. It's just, and then like you say, then the face comes up, and then it's like, oh dear, he's got that big square jaw of his that is just like this is a dude with power about him, a real aura. He's an impressive guy and actor.
It's like the scene in Spacey. How familiar are you with the episode?
I watched it Friday.
Excellent. The scene where Kurt goes to see Khan in his quarters and he said, I want to know these answers now. And he's saying, we will be very successful in your time, Captain. And he just taps his finger like that. And that says everything you need to know. Just in that one scene right there, it's so powerful, but it's so well done. And it's, again, the scene where Khan appears on the bridge of the Enterprise and he's going, I remember you, Kirk. And he's just got his hands like this. And he's like, yeah, this is not good.
One of the interesting things that's been said to me in the past is that he's wearing some sort of plastic chest thing, and like there's a necklace round that you can see is there to sort of hide the join. But that's not true. That's like an urban legend. It's just that
was his chest. He was that built.
Yeah, he was quite old. He must have been 60-ish looking at him at the time, surely.
Early mid-60s. I mean, I'm a big guy. I'm 6'3". I work out 4 times a week. I live on a farm. there is no way that I could get that sort of build without going to a gym 6 times a week or for 3 hours at a time. And yet he had that physique. I was like, okay. I mean, the only person I can think of that could possibly play similar would be somebody like Dwayne Johnson, who's got that physical presence, but he's just not got the right feel as an actor.
Yeah.
I mean,
you need the gravitas with the physique.
Yes.
And that's...
if you really wanted to remake Wrath of Khan in Darkness, you should have got somebody like him, or maybe Jason Momoa to play Khan, because they were originally going to have the guy in Skyfall, the guy with the blonde hair.
Javier Bardem?
That's him. He was going to be Khan, but they couldn't make it work because he was filming that at the time.
Well, he definitely would have been a better option.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. The other thing he said was, I based that character in Skyfall on Khan. He actually said that in an interview, and you can kind of see that. I mean, he's the only good thing in that film, it has to be said, because that film is not good. It has the same problems that Into Darkness does, but I will not get into that because,
we're here for the Wrath of Khan, and we've spoken about Into Darkness quite a lot, but then you can't avoid the comparison because it was a deliberate comparison on the part of J.J. Abrams to take and copy without ever understanding Star Trek or what makes the Wrath of Khan so good. And they say you have to care about the stakes, which they do brilliantly. You have to feel a real threat, which you need, like you say, somebody with the presence of Ricardo. But you also need clever. You can't go, this man's a genius, when like the whatever the plan was in Into Darkness was nonsense. This guy in this film, all the smarts and all the power, but he's been driven to breaking point by being asked more than any other human could have endured. He only survived, or they only survived, because of the genetic engineering that made them what they are. So you have to have... J.J. Abrams doesn't understand science fiction. I think that maybe not Nicholas Meyer, but there were people involved at a high level in The Wrath of Khan who'd read widely in the genre. It's hard to say how much Gene Roddenberry had to do with it, because Gene Roddenberry was kind of pushed out after the first one and was mostly ceremonial, mostly ignored in terms of story by this point, which
probably
was a good thing. But Gene Roddenberry was a part of the science fiction, what do you want to call it, when people like Heinlein, when people like Heinlein, Asimov, Bradbury, the greats of the genre were writing, he was part of that as well. So
he encouraged them to write episodes of the original series. So he had episodes by Theodore Sturgeon, by Norman Spinrad, by Richard Matheson,
Vonda and McIntyre.
They all wrote episodes for the series, and then as well as writing all the books. So he had hardcore science fiction writers. But Roddenberry absolutely hated this film. He didn't like the military aspect of it. He thought it was far too military. He said Star Trek was never military. Really? Why is he called Captain Kirk? Why do they call each other Sir? Why do they give each other orders? This is so military, it can't be taken for anything else. He thought that Khan was a dumbed-down villain, and he said he was not like that in the original series. And it was him who leaked the ending to the fans because he didn't like what they had in mind. He turned up at the Star Trek convention and he said, this is what the new film's going to be, and this is what the ending is going to be. And this was on a Friday night, and on the Monday morning when the people at Paramount got to work, their post room was filled from floor to ceiling with just bagloads and bagloads of really angry letters saying, this is terrible, we can't have this, you've got to change the ending and so on. And everybody who was a bit more level-headed said, well, let's go and see this film and see what it's all about. Because of that, there was a lot of interest in it. And, all publicity is good publicity. So they kind of shot themselves in the foot. The whole thing with the Genesis device, originally that was just going to be a weapon. It was not a weapon of peace. going to be turned into something which could, they even say in the film this could be turned into the worst weapon imaginable, which they talk about. But you need to have a demonstration of what this thing does so you understand it. And so that tape that they show is a really good way of doing that. Again, if they just said, we've got this piece of technology, it can turn a dead planet into a live one, well, show us, don't tell us. This film is brilliant for show, don't tell, and for setup and payoff, which is really important when you try to tell a story. And I will just put this out there, and you're probably going to roll your eyes, but in my second book, the bad guy's name is Montalban. Just as the registration of the aeroplane that blows up at the start is GKHNN.
God.
At one point, the McClellan character picks up an apple and he says, "There is no such thing as a no-win situation." That it may be a little bit on the nose. I just thought I'd just put that in there just as a little tribute. There's no dialogue lifted like J.J. Abrams does, and there's no plot point lifted like it's just a little reference there.
Okay, but your book is a military whodunit. It's not science fiction, so
not at all.
I think the difference in the audience there, I think that most people will tolerate that or not notice the references. So besides, this book is quoting literally from Moby Dick, so if you're not allowed to tribute your sources, what can you do?
Yeah, it's like Tale of Two Cities. He even quotes it as the best of times, it was the worst of times. And in the book, it mirrors Wrath of Khan, because at the end, Sidney Carton lays down his life so that his friend can survive. And it closes with, "This is a far better place I've ever gone to," which Dark Knight Rises again lifted wholesale. The whole last 10 minutes of Dark Knight Rises is just Wrath of Khan. He's got 4 minutes to get rid of a device which has been designed to power the city, which has been turned into a bomb, and he's got to get rid of it. And he's declared dead at the end. It's exactly the same.
Okay, yeah. To be honest, I hadn't noticed that watching the Batman thing, but I actually only watched that a couple of months back. So, that one I missed that one. But yeah, you are right. It's imitation, greatest form of flattery, right?
Yeah, exactly. I can live with that if it's just like a little reference, or it's just like a little thing like, oh, remember that? It's when you start lifting wholesale whole plot points and the whole storyline. That's when I start getting annoyed, because I'm like, well, if I wanted to watch a film, I would go and watch that film. I wouldn't just sit and watch the cheap knockoff.
Yeah, no. I mean, right, like if you compare the way the Batman film does it, what's it, the Dark Knight Rises or the Dark Knight that does it?
Dark Knight Rises.
It's the third one. Yeah, it's the third one.
Yeah.
If you compare the way that does it, like I said, I didn't even make the comparison, and I don't think a lot of people would. But when you have Star Trek Into Darkness, they clearly have no concept of Star Trek. They clearly have no concept of story. It is just a question of, if we throw enough stuff at the screen that looks cool, then people will come out of it accepting it. But what Star Trek 2 does with this finale, when you leave the cinema, you're like, didn't expect that. The emotional impact of Spock's death is incredible. The performances between the two as he's dying, incredible. You walk out going, maybe there's a chance because of Genesis and the way the ending shows you the planet. Maybe there's a chance, but it's powerful when you come out Into Darkness. You go, you first thought as a Star Trek fan or even a science fiction reader and watcher is that they've broken Star Trek, because spaceships don't need to exist when you can beam the entire way across a galaxy. So that's that. You don't need spaceships anymore. And then you've got magic triple blood, which means nobody can die anymore. So what is the point of anything going forward? You've completely broken Star Trek.
Yeah. The worst part about it for me was the scene where he says, okay, he woke me up so that I can design weapons and starships. He's 300 years out of time. How the hell is he going to know how to design a starship?
Yeah.
That'd be like asking, I've said this before, but that'd be like asking Napoleon to design your fighter jet. That is stupid. Yeah. Why would you even think that was a good plot point? No.
I mean, put Horatio Hornblower on an aircraft carrier, see how it gets on. It's just nonsense.
Yeah, they thought about a plot for about 30 seconds, and then they realised, how can we make this work? Instead of sitting down and actually plotting out how this is going to work and how this is going to play. I mean, you're a writer, I'm a writer. Your plan for your book does not necessarily follow through with the finished result.
No.
So, you're going to end up realising that, hold on, this doesn't quite work, but if you did it this way, it would, but this is going to take off in a different direction.
Yeah.
When I wrote the second book, originally it just started off as a straightforward mystery. And I thought, well, hold on a minute, there's got to be somebody behind it who's pulling the strings about why all of this is happening, and this is why I created the big bad, as it were. But how do you increase the stakes again? Well, you give one of the guys a problem that they need to resolve, because this guy has found out that you now have a girlfriend and she's now in danger, so you've got to stop that from happening. You just evolved over time in writing it and so on, and lots of corrections and so on. I think it turned out a lot better than the original idea was. Myself, I personally think the second book is better than the first one.
Okay. I haven't read your second one. I have got a copy of it, which I'm grateful for. But I will get round to it. Like I say, it's been a hectic year to this point.
That's actually the first draft of it. I've actually just finished the second edit. I sent them 14 pages of corrections to do. So that one is actually the first line edit. The final line edit has just gone back. So I'll tell you that when it comes through.
Going back to the storytelling aspect of what you were saying, was that Desmond Bagley, when he was asked how he wrote, is that he said he starts with a setup and then sees where it goes. So he never really planned out. And he said, if you're trying to chase the plan, your characters might take it in a different direction, and you have to go with them, not the plan. He said the only time that he didn't do that was the book that he rejected, which is now in publish, is Domino Island, which is a good book, but you can kind of see that the beginning and the end don't quite join like his other books. But I think that Nicholas Meyer and Harv Bennett said when he wrote the third one, he had an ending and he had to get there. And I think that is in part why the third one is less satisfying than the second one.
Yeah.
And I think it's also why it jetsons some of the points that we had, is because you end up with characters that are not relevant to where you get to or where you want to be. So then you end up carrying them. They're sitting in the back of the scene, not really doing anything. And if you look at the Wrath of Khan, there's a bit towards the end where David comes onto the bridge, and you're like, well, why is he there? What does he bring to it? And as the scene unfolds, you go, well, actually, you need him there, because he has to be the one that goes, that is the Genesis wave. None of the others would recognise it as that. So he has to be there. So you kind of go, why is he there? That's why. Part of the issue, Christ, we talk about J.J. Abrams a lot in this Star Trek video, but part of the issue with the J.J. Abrams thing is he hasn't realised Star Trek is about Kirk, Bones, and Spock, and the others are there when their story needs them. And if they're not needed for the story, they won't be there.
No, exactly.
But if you go, if I go, I've got to have Sulu, and I've got to have Chekhov, and I've got to have her, and I've got to give them all something to do, then you are chasing around trying to find things to do. And the most egregious example of trying to find people things to do is actually the Next Generation film, where they find the Fountain of Youth. And there's quite obviously a lot of characters there that you just don't need to be in it. And that is why, if you have David and Sadek, you have to lose somebody to make room for. If you look at Firefly, when they made the Serenity movie, they understood that a movie has less time for characters than a TV show. A TV show can be a true ensemble if you want it to be. But when you go into a movie, you've got a 2-hour runtime, and that, I think, is why Brooke and Wash were written out of Serenity, the film. And I think that there was... I think that they wanted to do that with this film, but maybe Trekkies are just too powerful an audience. What do you think?
I would say so, yes, because it was the Trekkies who saved the series back in the 60s. Gene Roddenberry again organised a massive writing campaign to the TV studio to safely save the series. So all of these Star Trek fans went reams and reams of letters. And again, he thought the same thing would happen with Wrath of Khan when he wrote letters saying don't kill Spock off and all this sort of thing. That's why he was doing it, to try and influence, because it didn't really work. But yeah, I mean, Star Trek fans, it's like James Bond fans, we're a pretty picky bunch, and we know what we like, and we know what's right and what's wrong, which is why you've got people like the Critical Drinker and Erotic and people like that who actually understand stories rather than saying, well, no, this is not right. You know, what you're doing is wrong. And I mean, fortunately, that guy Terry Matalis actually, because he wrote Star Trek, when it was actually Star Trek, he wrote on Deep Space Nine and Voyager, he actually understood that. And so that's why Picard Season 3 is such a massive cut above the first two. The first two series is, I totally recommend it.
I would have to sit through I think I watched the first 3 episodes of the first series and was just, I'm done, thank you anyway, not for me. And I really don't want to watch 2 series of that to get to a good one. I know that's...
You don't need to.
I just can't.
You don't need to. The third series is completely different. It doesn't reference anything from the first 2 series at all. It's like Next Generation after Season 8 or something like that. It's its own story. It references only Next Generation. There's one of the characters there from the early series, but nothing of that is referenced. So you would enjoy it. And as a complete story, I think it sagged a little bit, but it does provide a really good ending for those creators. So yeah, I would recommend Series 3. And like I say, it does not tie into the first 2 series at all.
Yeah, okay. I'm probably not ever gonna, but I might, on your recommendation, slightly more likely that I'll check it out. But no,
sure.
I kind of just noped out of Trek, I'm afraid. I like the old stuff and I'm happy watching Next Gen, but...
Agreed.
Yeah, or Deep Space Nine.
I'll give it a chance as long as it's decent. I mean, that Discovery show, I watched the first episode and I said, no, this is a pile of garbage. I'm not interested. I've not seen anything after that, and I have no intention of watching it. Same with that Strange New Worlds show. The second that they said, there's a bunch of Klingons that are singing and Spock is this autistic guy, I'm like, no, that is wrong. It's like making James Bond a drug addict. It's like, no, you just don't do that.
Well, he's an alcoholic.
Yes, true.
No, with the Discovery, I actually watched the entire first series, and the reason I did that was because my wife, who is not in any way interested in Star Trek, doesn't like Star Trek, but liked that because it was bombastic and noisy. And she's like, oh yeah, this is fun. But I'm sitting there like this, like having my teeth pulled. It's painful to watch. And yeah, I still have to sit here and watch it because you're enjoying it. And I'm like, yeah, we'll watch more Star Trek if that's what you want, great.
You need to just slip in some of the older stuff just to get you on side with that.
She's 9 years younger than me, and I think that the taste in things like that, like, needs colourful, lively, bombastic, happy to watch them, like any Marvel film, anything like that, no problem. But an episode of the original Star Trek, no chance, none at all. Just wouldn't happen.
That's a shame.
Yeah,
that's a shame. But I'm just going to brief reference this as well. Star Trek Nemesis. Overall, it's an awful film. But again, they tried to remake Wrath of Khan, but in a slightly different way. I think it was the word successful is, it's like trapping your hand in a car door versus stubbing your toe. Which would you rather watch? Well, I'd rather watch Star Trek Nemesis because it's actually is Star Trek as we knew it. Okay, it's pretty ropey, pretty awful, but at least they're actually trying. The final result was pretty shite, but I can sit and watch it with my brain turned off. Whereas Into Darkness, if I watch that now, I've not seen that since probably 2013 when it came out at the cinema. I had no interest in ever watching that film again because I know that it would just be like being punched in the face repeatedly. It's that insulting to the intelligence.
I saw Nemesis in the cinema, and I wasn't alone in laughing at how bad it was in the cinema, which I'd never experienced people laughing aloud at how terrible a film was in the actual theatre before. But I'd still watch that 100 times before I watched anything from JJ again. And to be fair to the people that enjoyed the first JJ film, I'm kind of like, sure, if you liked it, I can see why. Because it's lively enough and the characters are caricatures of what they were on Star Trek. So I can see why that you would like it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't see why anyone watches Into Darkness and enjoys that at all.
Yeah. It's like when I was at school, it's actually 25 years since I left school this weekend, my girlfriend at the time, she absolutely loved Buffy. She adored it. And she watched it every week because it was on right after Star Trek. I watched it occasionally just to keep it sweet, but I just could not get into it. It is just not my thing at all. But I can see why people like it. I can see why people enjoy it or get something out of it, because it's, it's coming of age, and you realise that you're having to grow up and all that sort of thing, and that's kind of like the real reason behind it. Like I say, it's not my kind of thing. It's a bit too American teenage girlish. It's kind of that sort of thing, but I can understand why. But I cannot understand why anybody would want to watch J.J. Abrams' film, or Star Trek or Star Wars, because he destroyed both equally, because he's just such a hack, a terrible writer, and just an awful director. But that's the last thing I'm going to say on it.
I quite liked Fringe. Have you seen Fringe?
Yes.
Did you enjoy it?
I thought it was okay. I know Leonard Nimoy was in it. That's kind of like the reason I watched it. I liked the first few episodes, but it was like Heroes, if you ever watched that with Zachary Quinto. Yeah. I liked the first few episodes of that, but then it very quickly went off the ball. It was like Lost, which was another J.J. Abrams thing. Oh, we've got a giant red ball, and oh, by the way, they all died at the start. Well, if they all died at the start, then what is the point of watching this series? You just basically shat all over your audience. Wow, brilliant, well done.
Yeah, I've never seen Lost.
Oh, God. The idea behind it is fine, but the final execution, and especially the final episode, it's like, I just want to bang nails into my own head with a phone book after that revelation. It's so stupid.
Yeah, do you know when the concept of something goes, that sounds interesting, but then literally nothing else about it sounds very interesting, so I was just kind of, no, but not for me. A bit like Heroes I watched. I never watched enough of it to get into it, but I saw a few episodes. I was like, yeah, that looks all right. Lost, when I saw bits of it, I was like, this looks like it's technically accomplished, well put together, but I'm just not that interested in it.
Yeah.
And now I know from having experienced other things by J.J. Abrams, including Fringe, that he can't stick the landing. He's all about concept and idea and stupid mystery boxes, but he can't stick the landing. So I now just... Say again?
That Cloverfield film, it started off well enough, but then, okay, there's a giant monster under New York, and okay, so what's the point of this? And it turned out there wasn't a point to it.
It was a cash-in on Blair Witch. Found footage films were like the thing. So it was like, what can we do? We'll do it like a monster film. How can we do that really, really cheaply? Well, the first half an hour will be like at a party with just teenagers chatting and stuff. And then they'll move across a city where you don't see anything and you only see the alien thing at the end. So it's going to be fairly cheap. It'll be fairly interesting and cash in on genre. So, I've seen it. I don't dislike Cloverfield, and I've seen the Cloverfield Lane one, which is kind of it's an interesting film. And then at the end, you see how it ties in with the others, but it's mostly about these people trapped in a bunker, not knowing what's going on. So in that regard, it's like almost the opposite of a J.J. Abrams film, because there's no bombast, there's no every 30 seconds exploding. It's just people in a bunker, sort of quite tense. It's quite enjoyable. I don't recall anything about it, so it wasn't that memorable. And it was a long time ago. But I remember thinking, that's all right.
I might want to look that up then if it doesn't have the stupid bombast and the stupid plot points that they try to get over, which obviously don't make any sense. I might take a look at that. But this is funny, right? We've not discussed any of the plot of Wrath of Khan at all, because the plot pretty much sells itself. I mean, it's a very, very simple story. The guy has been marooned. He wants revenge on the person who he says marooned him. The protagonist of the story is aging, he's off form, he's not happy with his place in life. He gets back with his command of his ship, but he makes mistakes as he's rusty because he's not been in command for many, many years, and he has to face the consequences of that and find a way to defeat his enemy. I mean, it's a very simple story. And they make a film now, and it has to have this plot twist and that plot twist, and this has to tie into this. You don't need any of that. You just need a good story.
It's you reach a point in a series, or you can, particularly if you're not particularly clever or you're not known for being clever, you've got to have things exploding where you either repeat what you've done before, 100 films with a Death Star in it, in Star Wars, for example, or you have to try and one-up. But the problem when you're exploding planets in a series, like how do you one-up that? And Star Trek got a little bit like that, in that how many times have we seen the Enterprise blown up now? And it's like, yeah, sometimes you go, is that all you've got? A little bit like, is there Death Star all you've got? For Star Wars, it's like, come on. These three films, because they follow on very closely, Star Trek 2, 3, and 4, I think they might be the last thoughtful science fiction to get a big screen treatment, because they are character-driven, they're thoughtful, and what makes The Wrath of Khan completely great, like a cut above films, is that the characters of Khan and Kirk, they're kind of evenly matched. There's not a huge difference between them, and all the actions that they do ring true. Like the first time I watched The Reliant coming up, why doesn't he put the shields up? Why doesn't he put the shields up? Why is he not putting the shields up? Because I'm a kid. And it's like, because he's actually a character, he's a human being. He's not getting it right like he would have done 10 years ago. It's all part of the portrayal of the character as a flawed human being that's like having to find his way again. And you just don't get that. You don't get that anymore. And you don't get it in Trek anymore. They would not be able to do that. It's just, I don't even want to discuss JJ anymore. It's like, the more I talk about JJ Abrams, the more annoyed I get and disappointed. It's just, I'm like the father. I'm not angry. I'm just disappointed. I know.
Yeah. Like in Inception, when he says, I'm not disappointed in that you tried, I'm disappointed in the fact that you thought that was important to you, which was the whole point of the story.
Yeah. With Star Trek, there's the theme of it is like aging and dealing with the fact that your abilities change. But what actually reminds me of is, I don't remember who said it. I know who told me at first, but I don't know who said it originally, and it definitely comes back to J.J. Abrams as well, is that everyone is promoted one step beyond their ability. Because, you're really good at that, get promoted. You're really good at that, get promoted. Eventually, you're promoted into a position that you can't do. Kirk is a terrible admiral at the start of this film. He's being given, go and inspect Enterprise. And I know that in a film you're not going to have him inspecting this or inspecting that, because you need to get on with it a little bit quicker. But it's quite clear, even in a little bit of time, that he can't be bothered. He doesn't want to do it. It's like, it's completely in keeping with the character as portrayed as at that point in his life. It's completely real. And we see him making mistakes. We see Khan making mistakes, and they're making mistakes because Khan is making mistakes because he's so driven by having vengeance. And it really is like, if Roddenberry wants to say dumbing down of the character, I don't agree with that, but it is a break from his original character, which was very, very thoughtful and clever and sort of cunning, whereas this guy's he's snapped. He's gone. He's not functioning right at all. And you go, well, why? Well, he's lost his wife. He's the woman that drove everything in the Space Seed episode. was taken from him. His people are dying around him. He's been presented with a challenge that, even though he surrounded himself by like 60, 70 Supermen, Ubermensch, the next generation, the next evolution of our kind, were presented with a challenge that they couldn't deal with. Now, the anger that you're going to have as a human being who has succeeded all the time, who is superhuman, has never met a challenge that he couldn't overcome, and yet all of a sudden, actually, here's one that's really going to put you up against it. You are going to snap. You are going to break. You are going to be like, somebody has to pay for this. I have been betrayed, even if you haven't, which, you know, with Kirk, you can kind of argue one way or the other. Kirk should have checked on him and didn't. So it's really clever. The two characters are so beautifully done in this that it is, as a writer, I think, aspirational. If you're writing a serious, thoughtful science fiction, to get, you don't have to copy these characters, but to get your characters right at that level, then I think that's aspirational.
The thing with Khan is he could have got out of there at any time. He'd got a ship, he could have gone anywhere he wanted, especially after he got the Genesis device, but he couldn't. He couldn't let go. Whereas Kirk could let go. If he had the chance, if the Enterprise was up to specs, he could have just gone to Starfleet and said, okay, we've got this problem, we need to do this, this and this. But he couldn't do that. He had to take Khan down on equal terms because the Enterprise is just not up to it. But Khan could have got out of there and he could have gone to do anything he wanted. In fact, the second in command even said, we can go anywhere we want. And he said, no, I want to kill Kirk. And that's his entire mission.
But when the Enterprise breaks for the Nebula at the end, and Khan doesn't think that Kirk is on that ship, he allows that guy to slow the ship. The guy is saying, we don't need to go in there. There's more dangerous for us. There's no benefit to us to go in there. You have what you wanted. And you can see Khan hesitating for the first time. The motivation is not quite there until Kirk's like, are you coming after me or not? And then he's like, full speed. Then he changes, and it's like, that's what I'm saying. It's like the character is just right. You see him suddenly becoming a little bit more thoughtful, a little bit more back to what he was, until that quarry is in front of him again, and then he can't resist the bait. It's really clever. The performances are great, but the characters, as they were written, also outstanding.
Yeah, absolutely. And the thing was that Ricardo Montalban actually went back and rewatched that episode before he made the film to get back into the character and to understand where he's coming from. And you can tell that he did his homework. Everybody did the homework to say, okay, this is, a continuation of that story, what's happened, what could cause this story to be more on the level and grow and grow and grow. And they did it perfectly. The only other science fiction film that I've seen that really builds that tension and then builds that story from the first one is Aliens. That takes the first film and it starts to build on that world, but also the motivation of the character. When Ripley's is in the machine saying, get away from me, you bitch. Yeah, she's trying to protect that kid. As in the first film, of course, the alien wants to propagate itself, and now it sees an ability to really propagate itself, and she has to stop it. And so you see that. With Empire Strikes Back, it's a little bit different because, yes, the story is on a different level to the first Star Wars, and yes, the characters grow, and the stakes are higher, but the actual payoff at the end isn't as great as in Aliens or in Wrath of Khan, I don't think. Some Star Wars fans are going to say, well, Luke became a Jedi Master under Yoda, or Han Solo was frozen in carbonite, or Darth Vader revealed this. Yeah, but if you actually watch it beat for beat, the progression and growth of the character isn't as great as in those other two.
It was about the time the fifth Star Wars film was coming out, so the Attack of the Clones. Went to the IMAX, did a Star Wars marathon, and Empire was always, when I was really, really young, Jedi was my favourite because it was bigger and louder. But when I sort of grew up a little bit, Empire was always my favourite. But when I went and saw them in a Star Wars marathon, Star Wars is the perfect Star Wars movie, and I mean A New Hope. Um, it is just everything is self-contained. Everything makes sense. Everything is delivered in the right way at the right time. The pacing of it is perfect. It is the perfect Star Wars film, and that perfection has never been matched. And I don't agree that Empire is better than Star Wars. Empire does a lot of things that will make people love it. Again, it develops the characters of Solo, of Leia, and Luke, and it puts them in a difficult situation and comes with a downer ending. So I can appreciate that a lot of people will watch that and will go, that is my favourite for those moments. And if it was a different genre, a different style of film, then I would wholeheartedly agree. But Star Wars it needs the spectacle as much as it needs the character. And Star Wars, the first film, perfectly lands every aspect of it. So for me, that's why it's the best one.
My mum agreed with that point completely, actually. The original Star Wars was her favourite. Yeah. So, and for pretty much those reasons, she said it was just simple. It was a simple story that you could understand. And then she started saying, "Oh, Empire's too complicated and there's too much going on." There's not so much too much going on. It's the fact that some of the stuff that's going on is not as interesting as other stuff going on. I think that's what she was getting at. I mean, I'll put my hand up. Empire is my favourite Star Wars film. I appreciate the original three. I do not care about the others. I just have no tolerance for them. I saw that Phantom Menace film in the cinema, and I just wanted to pour bleach in my eyes. It was just awful. It was the last film that,
I will, for the record, say that I absolutely love Empire. I'm not, I'm talking about the difference between two 10 out of 10 films for me. I saw Phantom Menace the day it came out. In the UK, like advanced screening, whatever it was, like a Thursday or whatever. And my mate turned up, and we made a bit of a day of it. And he turned up at lunchtime. He's like, "Look, I've got a copy of this that, nobody should admit to having a pirate copy on the internet, I'm sure, but he had a pirate copy of it. And he's like, do you want to see some of this before we go?" And I'm like, no, I want to see the big screen of the Lighthouse properly. And then it's like, do you know what? No, let's watch the first 5 minutes. So we put the first 5 minutes of the Phantom Menace on, and it was absolutely insufferable. It was awful. And I'm just watching going, oh my God, what is this? This can't be it. And not only am I thinking that, I'm thinking, shit, this is so bad, I don't want to see it this evening. And not only do I not want to see it this evening, I've got tickets to go with different mates on Monday. I'm going to see it twice in the same fucking weekend, and I don't want to see it either time. And when I actually did see it on the big screen, it did not help. It did not help. I'm just watching it going, what have they done? This is horrible. This is awful. And I've got to come back Monday and watch this again. Yeah, when I saw the second one, Attack of the Clones, I actually, I thought coming out of it, maybe 6 out of 10. It moved along at a quicker pace. There was more going on. It was a little bit less children. It was all a little bit more tolerable. But over time, watching that back, I hate it. Well, I hate it strong. I dislike it more with every viewing. And people say that the third one is like one of the better ones. No, it's the same reasons that I liked Jedi as a kid, because it was the one with the most spectacle. So I understand why you're saying it, but you are just wrong.
Yeah. I saw Phantom Menace. It wasn't the day it came out, it was the weekend it came out. It was the last film that we saw as school friends before we went off to different colleges and whatnot. And we thought, oh great, Star Wars film, we'll go and watch it. So we sat there, and my friend Sam, he said, is this film ever going to start, or are we just going to stand around watching people talking? Because I thought this was meant to be Star Wars, and there's no stars and there's no wars in this. And it was the perfect quote. And then we went across to the pizza parlour after the film had finished. We're all sitting there eating pizza, looking at each other and saying, and then somebody said, what did everybody think of the film? And you just felt the air getting cold. And it was my friend Andy, and Andy was a churchgoer, and he did not swear at all. that was the biggest piece. Check out that seat. That was a fucking waste of time and money. I'm like, yes, it was. I never want to see that film again.
When I saw, I think it was Star Trek Insurrection, but my numbers might be right, so it might have been Nemesis, but we went to see the Star Trek film, and the Star Wars trailer played in front of it, and people watched the trailer and walked out, and a couple of people were like, sit back down, jackass, what are you doing? You're paying to see a film and walk out after the trailer. And it wasn't even that good a trailer. I was like, actually, no, I don't agree, because the trailer was amazing for the Phantom Menace. It really made you go, oh, this looks like it's going to be a lot of fun, partly because of John Williams' music. But yeah, it looked like it was going to be a lot of fun. And then you watch it and it's just like, oh, you have misjudged this film as a filmmaker really badly.
You have chosen poorly, as I said in Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. Yeah. And yeah, again, I've seen the original 3 Indiana Jones films on big screen, because our local Pacific doors are screening every week old films. So I've seen Jaws, 3 Indiana Jones films, Back to the Future, Ghostbusters, 1989 Batman, all that sort of stuff. Didn't get to see any of them at the cinema because I was too young. But catching up with them on big screen is fantastic. I'm not going to get into the whole Kingdom of the Crystal Skull thing. That I didn't hate it as much as J.J. Abrams' Star Trek, but I was not impressed.
And have you seen the latest one?
Yes.
Have you seen my video about the latest one?
Yes, I have. God, just rub sandpaper on my eyes, please. It was just awful.
Yeah.
I don't even want to think about it. I mean, this is not just a fault of Jar Jar Abrams. It's a fault of filmmaking in general. There's no thoughts, there's no heart, there's no soul in any of these films. They are literally just there to make money. They're not trying to tell a good story. They're not trying to appeal to people in a way to possibly make them think or get some enjoyment. It's just what was popular 30 years ago. Oh, let's go make another Jurassic Park film. Let's go make another Independence Day film. Let's go make another Fugitive film. It's like, no. Just get some new ideas.
New ideas are out there, but they don't come with an audience attached. So if you're pumping 100 million, 200 million into something, it's a risk. But Godzilla -1 cost $11 million to make.
That was a fantastic film. I really enjoyed that.
Movies don't have to cost hundreds of millions. They cost that much because you're overpaying yourself. The people that are like 10 different producers all making millions, and you're like, well, there's 20 million that's not on the screen. It's in your pocket. People are paid too much, and the money doesn't go in the right places. People overestimate massively in the Twitter age who is a celebrity and who is not, because a movie star will put a little bit on your box office, not a lot. A movie star tied with a concept, tied with the right marketing, puts proper money on your film. But going, it's got George Clooney in it, that's not going to make you 100, 200 million, 10, 20 perhaps. They overestimate massively the draw that these people have. And that is why they spend this money on them as actors that they're just not worth. You're better off with just getting a decent actor. You look at somebody like, I was talking about him yesterday with a mate of mine, Pete Postlethwaite, may he rest in peace. Yes. What a great actor he was. Arnold Schwarzenegger has spent his life, even now making direct-to-video sequels to Escape Plan and things like that, being paid more per film than Pete Postlethwaite ever made. But one elevates your film, and one, with the right concept, elevates your bank balance. Schwarzenegger is a draw with the right concept, or he was, not so much now. Pete Postlethwaite put his name above the credits, is not attracting millions of people, but when you see a quality film with a quality performance from him in it, you go, he's elevating this film, like a second Jurassic Park film. He's by miles the best one in it, but I bet he wasn't paid the most. Like, where are you paying the money? Because who's adding to your box office? Jeff Goldblum? Come on, probably not.
Well, Pete Postlethwaite was in Inception. All he did was sit in a bed, yet it was a great performance, and him and Cillian Murphy bounced off with it. I mean, Inception is a case in point. That was a concept. Yes, it had Leonardo DiCaprio in it, but the film was so good, The marketing was so good that people went to see it, and people enjoyed it for what it was. And have you seen Memento?
Yeah.
Christopher Nolan. Yeah, that's another really, really good one. Not very much money was spent on it at all. It had Guy Pearce in it, but the idea behind it was so good that it launched his career.
Yeah. You're better off making 10 movies for 20 million each than one movie for 200, because your 200 movie better be a banker, and there's no such thing anymore. The last 5 years have shown that even Marvel films are not making that sort of money back. But Godzilla -1 made a ton of profit for everyone involved because the cost was right.
Yeah, and Rafa Khan versus Star Trek Motion Picture, as you said at the top, they spent a ton of money on the first film. Yes, it made a ton of money, but it didn't make anywhere near as much profit as Rafa Khan did.
No.
And motion picture has got its fans, and I understand and appreciate that. They like the hard science fiction, they like the fact that it's in keeping with the style of the original series. But if you look at any of the votes, Rafa Khan will always come top because of the fact that it's got the story, the performances, the action. Actually, there's not that much action in it, relatively speaking. You know, there's one brief punch-up and 3 little space battles, and that's it. It's the level of storytelling that's the thing that's so good about it, and that is why it's my favourite Star Trek film. It will always be my favourite Star Trek film, and I think it's one of the best films ever made.
I agree with you. I think I put it in the top, my top 5 movies of all time. I base that purely on how much I liked them, how much I enjoyed them, as much as how good they are on a technical level. But I think it's outstanding, and I really, really love it. And it's like you say about the scale of it. It feels big, but when you go, actually, it's 2 ships, sort of trading a handful of laser blasts and torpedoes across a film. And the very next year, you've got Return of the Jedi coming out with the battle at the end, and so it's like incomparable. But I watched Wrath of Khan before I watched Return of the Jedi, and I really enjoyed Return of the Jedi. So
I like Return of the Jedi. I mean, yes, it doesn't have the depth of, it doesn't have the simplicity of the first one. It doesn't have the depth of the second one, but it's still a fun film, and it's still enjoyable. Yeah,
it's a satisfying conclusion to the 3 films. Thank you again, Barry, for joining me. Please tell everyone where they can find out a little bit more about you, and particularly your books.
Okay, so my channel is That Guy from SETI Alpha 5, which, considering what we've just talked about, is quite appropriate. I have a book that is coming out on June the 13th. It's called Half Pursuit, and it's published by Black Rose Writing. My friend here actually helped me to edit it. And the second book is actually coming out on the 7th of November, and that one is called Blind Corner. It's not yet available for pre-order, but it will be available again through blackrosewriting.com. I also have a website. It's called bodhiofci5.tripod.com, and if you link to that on my channel, then you'll find it.
Cool. I'll put a link to everything that I can down in the comments, so be sure to check out Barry on his channel, and definitely check out his books when they come out. See you in the next video. Bye.
See you later.